Good afternoon and welcome. My name is Irfan Nooruddin. I'm a professor at Georgetown University and director of the South Asia Center at the Atlantic Council. And on behalf of my colleagues at the South Asia Center, it's a great honor to welcome all of you to this private roundtable discussion with author, lawyer, and advocate Dawood Ghazanavi. I will introduce Dawood more formally in a second, but just again to reiterate, if everyone could just keep their video off and themselves muted, that will enable a smooth recording of this session. You will notice that there is no chat function in this, so we are hoping that you will ask your questions when the time is right by raising your hands and then turning your video on to ask your question. Over the last 20 years, really since in the aftermath of 9/11, 2001, the United States has prosecuted a war on terror, largely centered in Afghanistan, focusing on rooting out those parts of Al-Qaeda that were deemed responsible for prosecuting the attack on the United States on September 11, 2001. A major casualty was the front through which that war was prosecuted, and that was, of course, the United States using Pakistan, its longtime ally, as a way of getting access to the eastern border of Afghanistan to supply and protect its troops. Over the 20 years that have passed since September 11, 2001, this war has taken many casualties. One of them arguably has been the state of US-Pakistan relations, and it is that topic that we are here this afternoon to discuss. How did a relationship that has been so critical, so strategic for the United States turn sour, and what can we do to enhance the people-to-people relations between citizens of Pakistan and the United States in order to force their governments to be better collaborators with each other? To help us understand this, we have asked a prominent advocate at the Supreme Court in Pakistan, an author in his own right, Mr. Dawood Ghazanavi, to come and discuss this topic with me and then with you. Dawood is the author of a book called Affair Unheard, the story in which, as writing it both as a barrister, but really with a journalist's sense of the personal details, uncovers the curious story of Afia Siddiqui, who has been in American prisons for her alleged involvement in Al-Qaeda and in terrorist plots. He will tell us a little more about that book in the coming minutes, but our job here is to situate this particular story in the broader context of US-Pakistan relations. Dawood is going to lay out an argument for us. The argument in a nutshell is that this particular case represents a larger story of the Pakistani people feeling like their contributions to America's war on terror have been unrecognized. And that in fact, the symbolism behind the imprisonment of this particular woman for these many years in what has been a largely opaque judicial process should not be underestimated. And that in fact, the United States might be able to secure a great deal of goodwill among the Pakistani people if it were to repatriate Ms. Dr. Siddiqui back to Pakistan and or find other ways of bringing her case into the public light. We do not ask that everyone on this call agree with that particular position or that particular argument, but as an argument about how we might think of breathing new life into US-Pakistan relationships, we think it is worth a serious discussion, and we appreciate you joining us this afternoon to do it. Many of these arguments, I should add, were previewed in a blog post that Dawood wrote for the Atlantic Council's New Atlanticist blog, and you can find it on our webpage as well. So without further ado, Dawood, it is such a pleasure to welcome you here. We wish so much that we could be hosting you in person at our offices at the Atlantic Council, but obviously that is, we are unable to do so because of the restrictions around the COVID pandemic. But we're so glad that you were able to make the trip from Pakistan safely. We hope you're able to enjoy your time in the United States in spite of all the restrictions And we look forward someday to being able to do this again in person. But for right now, welcome. And the floor is yours to lay out for us who represent, I should add, a cross-section of leading voices and thinkers from the academia, from think tanks, from the policy circle, and from the journalism world. What you see as the key aspects of your research, very detailed research about Afif Siddiqui's case, and what you would advise the US government to do in order to help repair the US-Pakistan relationship. Please, over to you.
First of all, can you hear me? Is it clear? I'm just the first person on the webinar. This is the first time.
You're coming through loud and clear. Thank you.
I would like to especially thank the Atlantic Council first for providing me the platform to speak on behalf of the people of Pakistan on US and people of Pakistan relationship during the war on terror era, and how they believe, the people of Pakistan, it can be mended. I mean, we all know that US and Pakistan relationship has its history back from Pakistan independence. Both countries have complied with each other's needs at times, and both have shown estrangement at times too. Pakistan has always sided with the West, even during the Cold War, through being a member of either SEATO and SANTO in 1950s or 60s, and later during the Soviet invasion in Afghanistan. And Pakistan actually collaborated with that venture with the US, helping train the Afghan Mujahideen in Pakistan, training camps and everything like that, while the money was coming in from America. And this war has its own ramification, to which Pakistan is still facing. I mean, this war on terror is the longest war Pakistan has ever been part of, as a frontline state for the United States. And the 9/11 was a tragic event in the US history. And as a reasonable citizen and a Muslim, and even the Pakistani citizen, we all condemn such acts. And we feel sorry for the families who lost their lives during that time. But Pakistan was one of the first countries who condemned it and offered the help. But the way America approached Pakistan offer to help was very embarrassing. I mean, like General Mahmood, DGISI, who was in America, he was being asked that by the written Armitage that either you are with us or against us, or if you don't help us, we're gonna throw you back to the Stone Ages. I mean, that's like something like embarrassing for the people of Pakistan, the kind of help we offered. And I think there were 7 demands which were put to General Musharraf, and he accepted all of them, which actually surprised Colin Powell as well. So this is much we were trying to help the Americans at the time. And one thing which is really, really interesting to express here was when Musharraf took the people of Pakistan into confidence that we're going to be part of this war just because this is a fight against the terrorism, and the Americans are promising to resolve the issue of Kashmir. This is the golden moment. But can you see the condition of Kashmir now, where Kashmir is, what has happened during the lockdown, even today, what kind of situation the Kashmiris are going through? So what is the matter of Kashmir right now? I mean, like, this is just like something which is just out of my mind. I mean, so when we go back during these 20 years, we lost over 50,000 lives and lost billions to the economy. And being as a lawyer, I have seen within my own eyes that we have compromised our sovereignty, and even infringing the fundamental rights of the people of Pakistan, where it comes to backing all those American private programs like extraordinary rendition programs, where people in Pakistan were being picked up and handed over to the CIA. And even today, we are still facing all those missing person cases. And the first time in the history of Pakistan, we send army to the FATA region. We never sent any army in the FATA region since 1947, but we sent the army to the FATA regions. And at the same time, we used drone strikes over there. And can you imagine, with the drone strikes, thousands of innocent people died as a collateral damage. Even at that time, Colin Powell said that this is actually hyping up the situation. And what happened in the result? We had to fight our own war with our own country, with all those suicide bombing, killing, even killing the army officials in Pakistan. So this is what was happening during that time. during all this war and terror. Now, when this peace agreement was being signed between the United States and the Taliban, we are extremely happy. I mean, many people in Pakistan who have been called as a pro-Taliban, who have been called as a Taliban sympathizer, they said very long time ago that this would have happened before. But anyways, this is happening, and we are really, really happy that this all things is happening after a long time. And as a Pakistani, we believe that maybe in last 20 years, we were just fulfilling American strategic aims. This is how we see the situation. But anyways, things are going further ahead. And currently, during this week, the negotiation between the Afghanistan government and the Taliban it's very happy news again. And remind you, Pakistan won peace in Afghanistan. Even during the whole war on terror, Pakistan always pressed to have peace in Afghanistan. And it is one of the country who have over 2 million refugees, Afghan refugees in Pakistan. We feel proud to host those people. They are being living like as a citizen in Pakistan. And think about the country who is poor and how we are dealing with all those issues and just not being said that the way we are going through. So I'm a professional attorney in Pakistan, and I practice public importance matter in Pakistan. So when I read the peace agreement between the Taliban and the US, in which it stated that the Afghan government is going to release 5,000 the Taliban fighters in exchange of thousands of the Afghan government fighters. What astonished me at this moment is that they're releasing all those people who are deadliest people, even in the eyes of America from the last 20 years. They are the people who fought in the battlefield. These are the people who are still having the eye that they can go back to the battlefield, but still they're set free just for what? To bring peace in the region. We appreciate that. But at the same time, I feel really imperative now to put forward a name of one Pakistani woman who has been imprisoned in American prison. Her name is Afia Siddiqui. I mean, Afia Siddiqui's case, I got into in 2018 for her repatriation in the Supreme Court of Pakistan. When I understood the case, I actually wrote the book, and the book name is Afia Unheard. I mean, Afia Unheard was published last year in America. In this book, I have explained the trial of Afia Siddiqui, what actually happened in the Southern District Court, what was she's going through. I try to explain the American administration, the case which has highly misunderstood. This is what I really believe. So if I talk about Afia, she's a Pakistani citizen, which has been very much misunderstood around the globe. She's a Pakistani citizen, came to America in 1990 and went to University of Houston. Later, she transferred to MIT for doing her biology degree, undergrad degree, then went to Brandeis University to do her master's degree, and then PhD in neuroscience. 2002, she moved back to Pakistan. And in 2003, along with her 3 children, she just disappeared from Pakistan. And for 5 years, she went missing. And in 2008, she found in Ghazni, outside the governor of Ghazni's compound, along with the boy. And later she was sent to Afghan police station by the Afghan police. Over there, 6 American officials came to interview her, but there became an incident over there where she was being charged with attempted murder while she was holding a M4 gun against the American official. But unfortunately, she was being shot 2 times in her stomach, was taken to Bagram Hospital. And from there, she was renditioned to America to face trial in the Southern District Court. I mean, being as a Pakistani, I have seen all the documents. Nowhere it shows that the Pakistani people were taken into, Pakistani government was taken into confidence that we are taking away your citizen, either with your consent or without your consent. We don't know this yet. So this is one of the things, we are still concerned what actually happened with our rights. Then during the trial, before the trial, basically, she was facing not fit for the trial because she had PTSD, post-traumatic stress disorder. And then she was sent to Coastal Medical Center for treatment and at the same time her assessments. And after a year, the court found that she is mentally fit for the trial, but even her lawyers at the time believed that she's not fit for the trial. So this whole thing was happening and she was sentenced for 86 years. I mean, the interesting fact was that that she actually, the jury found that her action is not premeditated. I mean, that really surprised me for that long sentence. And what astonished me now is that during the 5 years, from 2003 and 2008, she went missing. And during those years, she was being given all the names with all the pseudonyms like Lady Al-Qaeda, Taliban fixer, Al-Qaeda fixer, you name it. And they tried to implicate her into all those Al-Qaeda conspiracies like Baltimore gasoline bombing case, then this Liberia diamond money fixer as Al-Qaeda, all those things. But the most surprising thing for us, and even for me to write this book was, and to raise up this issue was, nowhere in American court she has been charged with any terrorism offenses. Nowhere. This is like a fixed fact that there's no terrorism charges against her in any American court. So that really gives me a sign that what actually has happened. And I believe, being as a Pakistani, we have been so unfairly treated on this case. I mean, like me as a student at the time in England, I mean, I left Oxford at that time and I went back to the law school when this case was, grown up. And I see as embarrassment that even educated Pakistanis have been seen as a terrorist. I mean, this was not a good gesture for me, being as a Pakistani. So I really believe that was not really the way we were looking about. So now, when we talk about as a Pakistani, I mean, even after a decade, she's still relevant in Pakistan. I mean, she is everywhere in Pakistan, and they've been seeing her as, I mean, like within the ambit of Islamophobia as well during the time of war on terror. And can you imagine how strong her influence is in Pakistan, that the Prime Minister of Pakistan, the current Prime Minister of Pakistan, have her repatriation in his election manifesto? And recently, the Senate of Pakistan, which have all the political parties, they have a unanimous resolution that she's daughter of the nation. Her case is still in the Supreme Court of Pakistan for her repatriation. So this is where her case is. Where does we stand? What we should believe? So in my perspective, I have seen, and this is my major concern, that her detention in the United States has harbored anti-Americanism animus around the globe. You name any terrorist organization which have not used her plight for its own personal interest. So what I see is that this action, if they repatriate Afia back to Pakistan, which doesn't mean to set her free, that means is that she must be handed over to the Pakistan authorities, and let's stop this plight to be used by those terrorist organizations, which is still getting used. I mean, we feel that. And also, it will help the people of Pakistan to understand that the American administration does concern their values and does concern that what has happened to us, because we believe that our sovereignty has been damaged during those 20 years. So this is where I stand. So I consider that Afia's repatriation is going to make a difference. And her mercy petition is to the President of the United States right now. He's going for the elections as well. So I really feel that this case must be considered within the ambit of the Afghan peace process, and at the same time, because they are setting a standard to bring peace. So let's consider this case. So this is my view to Atlantic Council to express.
Dawood, thank you. One can see the elements that make you probably a very successful barrister, a very consistent and complex case laid out very clearly for all of us. So thank you for that. Let me start. You make the point that Prime Minister Irfan Khan has had this repatriation in his manifesto. You mentioned the Senate resolution naming Afia Siddiqui as daughter of the nation. But when we think about the broader scope of it, maybe you can take a couple of minutes to tell us what has the Pakistani government done to advance this case over the last decade? Has it been enough? What have been the shortcomings of the Pakistani government, of the official Pakistani position, to find, in your words, a better resolution of this outcome, of more justice, as it were?
Well, if we talk about the current Prime Minister of Pakistan, he was the person who raised this issue in 2008 when she was found outside the Ghazni compound and she was being shot and taken to America. He was one of the first person who raised this issue. And secondly, when the People's Party government came into power, obviously, when the case went to Southern District Court, the government of Pakistan did offer help to her and they allocated funds and the government of Pakistan hired the lawyers at the time. But what I see was striking at that time was that she was not mentally well. She was not mentally understood what was going through. And this was the case which was not understood by the people in Pakistan as well. And remind you, this was the time when the war on terror was at its heights. And the relation between the government of Pakistan and America during 2008 and 10 was so estranged. I mean, at that time, both were not on the same page on different issues. So Pakistan was always been in a position of haste that on what condition they can ask for this prisoner and how they're going to deal with that prisoner when it comes back to Pakistan because of all these terrorism issues. But the striking event, which I still believe, and it is very relevant, that even in the court, they never mentioned that she has ever been accused of any terrorism charges because there was no terrorism charges on her in the court. But the case was really, really highly misunderstood in Pakistan at that point. And all the governments, even today, like I said, in the Senate, all the governments in the past and even the political parties right now, they have actually asked for her repatriation. But what I found the striking thing is, and the most hardest thing is that what is the avenue available? I mean, the legal avenue they have tried, and she has, due to her mental illness, couldn't understand the legal avenues of the case. So the case has got messed up in my personal opinion, just because of the situation was going on. And then asking the American president for getting back somebody who's become so controversial may come like a bargaining kind of thing. So the government of Pakistan would feel, I don't know what they're gonna ask in return. So the avenue which was available was through legal avenues. It has never been exhausted. So this has surprised me that case has never been understood. I mean, when I wrote the book and I found some the past officials who have been retired now, when I talked to them about this case, I think they never knew about the case. They never understood the case. I mean, this is what's surprising for me. That's why I came forward to let the American administration and the Pakistani administration to understand what the case is all about.
Given that you've argued that the case has not been well understood and that in fact even high-level officials were not always aware of the details based on your interviews, what explains why this case continues to resonate among the Pakistani public, by your estimation? So you said in your opening statement that this remains an issue in the news. Who's keeping it in the news? Who's promoting it? Whose interest does it serve to keep this story in the news in Pakistan, given the lack of official attention to it over the last decade?
Like I explained, Irfan, that in Pakistan during 2002 and 2008, extraordinary rendition program was keeping its pace. Many people were being picked up at the time. And the way she got disappeared, and the way she went missing, and the way she came out from Ghazni, the people of Pakistan purely believed that she was being picked up from Karachi by the CIA officials and been handed over to one of the secret prisons around the globe and victim of being tortured and these kind of stuff. That sympathized the people of Pakistan, what they're going through. This was the first reason which gave the highlight of the case. And the second thing was that she was a woman and she was being picked up with her 3 children. And at the same time, she was being given such a hype around the globe that she is a terrorist operator, but in the court, she was never being charged with any of such sort of terrorism charges. So that was one of the elements which hyped up the people of Pakistan. And even during that time, General Musharraf government was going, people have resentment against the Musharraf government, and also this old judiciary problem was going on at the time. So all the political parties, I would say all the political party has exploited the circumstances and the condition which she was going through. And remind you, anti-Americanism during the time of war on terror was on the height. So every section of the society used her plight for their own personal interest. So what really strikes me was the way the terrorist organization used her, which she has nothing to do with. So that was the thing. These are the organization and interest groups which are still trying to use her in the future of their manifesto. And that really strikes me.
That's interesting. Let me just ask a somewhat pointed question, recognizing that it might be slightly unfair. Do you know of public opinion data? I mean, whenever people refer to the people of Pakistan or the people of, I'm from India, the people of India, I'm reminded of the fact that to generalize to the level of 300 million people or 1 billion people is a business. But you've done your research. You have a sense of the pulse of the population. What do you base that set of claims on? Just to keep us educated. What would be the kinds of evidence that we could point to if you had a chance to make the case, say, to people in Congress or at the State Department?
Yes.
That how do we know whether the people of Pakistan actually care about this? What kind of evidence would you want to show them to make the case
about
this is a big issue?
You talk about the Afia's case, or you talk about
a little of both. I'd like you to separate. I realize the
this is very interesting. I mean, like it helps me to explain how I got into this case as well, and how I got in this case. This is really interesting. I mean, when I appeared before the Supreme Court for her repatriation case, and I got over 20 to 25,000 different sort of messages, letters, wishful thinking, and all those messages from the people of Pakistan that I have raised her issue in the Supreme Court of Pakistan. Even at that time, I never knew how much influence she had within the Pakistani people, and especially her plight, being as a woman, and the way they believe even today that she was being picked up. And the most interesting thing was that even in Pakistan, when you go to the rickshawala and you just simply explain him that, you're working on Afia's case, the kind of respect they give you, the kind of respect you get around the country just because you are working for her repatriation, that really fascinates me. And that really surprised me in the fact how much the people of Pakistan have such kind of animus even today of American action during that time. So I think this was my research in a way, and how various TV channels covers her. I mean, like if anything happens to her, how she becomes the headlines of the news, how she is being seen as a voice of people of unheard. That's why I made the book name Afia Unheard, because they represent the unheard voice. She represents the unheard voice of the atrocities of the Pakistani people during the war on terror. So that's why she's a focal point. Think about it this way, she's a focal point. So that's how she is getting attention, because she's still there, she's still alive, and she's in the medical center. So people see that plight in a very, very sorrowless way, that, somebody is mentally ill, somebody is in American prison, she's still alive, she's a woman, her children is in Pakistan, her family is in Pakistan, she has never met any of his family members in the last 18 years. So all these things, remember, South Asia is a very emotional society. We live on those emotions, and that's why I'm expressing their concern on this case.
I appreciate that. Let me remind those of you attending that we would love to have you ask a question. So please use the raise hand function. And when I call on you, if we could turn your video on so you can ask the question directly to Dawood, that'd be great. Let me ask one last question before I open it up. Imagine, right, what's powerful about the case you've laid out is really the connection between the immediate micro situation of this particular individual and the broad macro situation of US-Pakistan relations. In that sense, it's the ultimate story, right? You use the particular to illuminate the general. Let's say that you had a conversation with somebody with sympathetic voices within the US government, and they said, look, we want to rebuild US-Pakistan relations, but this is not something we can do, right? Firstly, what else can be done for the broader sake of stronger US-Pakistan relations at this point in time that don't involve say, the repatriation specifically of Hafiz Siddiqui? What would be the compromise, if any? And you can say, look, no, this is an all or nothing affair, but just I want to push you. If, for the sake of stronger US-Pakistan relations, what sort of advice could we give, well-wishers of Pakistan and the American government that would be productive and could move the conversation forward? So why don't you answer that, and then I'll open it up to the questions.
I think so. The first thing, being as a lawyer and being as a person, what I believe, because I have lived in the West for long as well. First thing, respect our sovereignty. That's the first thing. Respect the value of people of Pakistan. And secondly, the most important thing to American administration is that respect the people of Pakistan. You must engage with the people of Pakistan. The people of Pakistan, even they have the hardest time with America, but they still want to work with America. They still want. But you have to build up this trust. I see within those 20, like giving this lip services now to the Pakistani government during the peace talks that thank you very much, without you it was not possible. But what about the sacrifices? Who's gonna repent back those ones? We lost lives, over 50,000 lives. Even a single person in Pakistan, if you might know, they run the whole families. You destroyed the families. Families have been disintegrated. So we need respect. That's the first thing. And second thing is that we are strong enough now to understand the issues. We don't need too much dictation, like do more, do more. This is the whole thing we've been grown up during the war on terror. Do more, do more. I think so we need to get out of this. We need to have a bilateral relationship, and all these repatriation issues, even, think about, there was an article in the Time magazine about freeing somebody from America called Nooruddin. He was the biggest drug baron in Afghanistan, and they've been considering to repatriate him as well during the peace talks. So the peace talks has opened a new avenue. Let's consider the facts. I'm a lawyer. I understand if there was any aspect in her case which I found is dangerous for both of the countries, I would have never raised that issue in front of the Americans. That's my main concern. I feel this can help counterterrorism. I feel it can amend the relationship. That's why I raised this issue. So this is where I stand.
I appreciate that. I think that's sort of one of the nuances of the argument that all of us would do well to consider, that this does not require, I realize that you attest to Hafiz Siddiqui's innocence of the charges, but as the prisoner exchange in Afghanistan illustrates, innocence is not a prerequisite for prisoner release. Sometimes the release can be done because there's a larger goal being served as well. And that's an interesting point that I definitely need to think about, and I'm sure others do as well. To move the conversation forward, once again, questions welcome, but I see a question first. I'd like to recognize Jahanzeb Ali. If you could turn your video on, sir, and introduce yourself and ask your question, please. Hello, Jahanzeb Ali.
Yes, can you hear me, sir?
Coming through loud and clear. Please, go ahead.
So this is Jahanzeb Ali. I'm the Washington correspondent for ARY News TV in Pakistan. Thank you so much for doing this, and it's lovely to see Barrister Dawood here. He's a good friend of mine. But before my question, I just wanted to correct him for some issues. On some points, I'm not agree with him. First of all, he says that Irfan Khan used the name of Hafiz Siddiqui in his campaign, in his election campaign. So, it's kind of a political stunt because he wanted to get the votes of the specific groups in Pakistan, like whatever he was supporting the Tehreek-e-Taliban Pakistan at that time. He was against the military operation against them. And you know what happened with the Tehreek-e-Taliban Pakistan. Pakistani army launched operation against them and, still finding their supporters in Pakistan. So he used the name of Hafiz Siddiqui to get the vote. And after, when he became the prime minister, the things are changed. Because I'm being in touch with the people of the Pakistani establishment. Being a journalist, we talk to them on the different topics to understand the situation. So what I believe, the Pakistan establishment is not very serious to get Afia back to the country, because they have fears that if they get Afia back to the Pakistan, the kind of religious fanatics or some militant groups can use her name to recruit more jihadis, and that kind of thing spread more hate against America. And one more thing that I'm sorry to say, people of Pakistan has nothing to do with Afia Siddiqui. Nobody calls her the daughter of the nation. Only religious fanatics and the militants and terrorist groups call her the daughter of the nation. Common people in Pakistan, the common man in Pakistan has nothing to do with Afia Siddiqui. So my question to Barrister, is a very good friend of mine. I mean, is she some kind of hero, Afia Siddiqui, or she brings some kind of laurels to Pakistan? That that Barrister Saab is saying that people of Pakistan has nothing to do with Afia Siddiqui. Actually, there are specific groups, like I told you, the religious fanatics, some terrorists or militant groups. They wanted Afia back to Pakistan. Not every single Pakistani wanted her back to Pakistan. And if you remember that last year, Prime Minister Imran Khan was in New York to attend the UN General Assembly session. And he was at Council of Foreign Relations and some other different think tanks. He didn't mention the name of Afia Siddiqui, not even the United Nations, not even any any think tank. And you can understand what is really going through. I mean, the establishment in Pakistan do not want to put up this case, because there was like talks that we can swap Dr. Shakil Afridi with Afia Siddiqui, and we are not hearing anything like since long on that too. So that's my question. Why are you just so trying so hard to get Afia back to the country? She's a convicted and 85 years of she's in the American prison right now. So I mean, she's some kind of hero, Afia Siddiqui.
I appreciate that question. While Dawood is thinking about how you'd like to respond, I would like to ask Miriam Sabir to ask her question as well, please. Miriam?
Yes, can you hear me?
Yes, thank you.
I had a question. I know...
Miriam, can I ask you to introduce yourself first, please?
Yes, I'm a freelance journalist and based in Pennsylvania. So my question was, I know in his book, Dawood has mentioned in his conclusion that senators such as Lindsey Graham could be instrumental in, possibly working towards like a reduction of her sentencing, because her sentencing was quite intense, 86 years. So I wanted to ask him a little bit about that and what role some senators such as Lindsey Graham could play. And I know that he did mention, Shakil Afridi as another prisoner of interest that America is interested in. So I kind of wanted to know his opinion about that. And what grounds, on humanitarian grounds, there are to reduce her sentencing, what he thinks the solution may be.
Thank you, Miriam. I appreciate the question. Thank you for being here. Dawood, would you like to take any of those questions that have been posed to you, and then we can...
I would really like to answer John Zabe's questions. I mean, it was more like an accusation on me than a question. So basically, the first thing is that, I mean, if he talks about the Prime Minister Imran Khan and his stance in the past, he has never supported TTP. He has never. The only thing what he has done is he actually asked the government of Pakistan at the time to have a dialogue with them. To have a dialogue with somebody doesn't mean you are supporting somebody. It was just all about, there were different splinter groups which Pakistan had agreements during the time of Musharraf as well, in Malakand region, all these regions. So having a peace deal and having such kind of dialogue doesn't mean you are supporting anybody. It has been wrongly interpreted. Second thing is that he has said that Imran Khan has never mentioned her name during the last year visit. No, in the Fox News interview, when the interviewer kept pressing about Shakil Afridi, then he did mention Afia Siddiqui. And he did say that the people in Pakistan, even with the government level, they want Afia to be exchanged with Shakil Afridi, but we are still considering, and there can be something in the future about that thing. Also, at the time he became the prime minister, the issues of the country and the situations were different. So maybe that was difficult at the time to speak about those issues because of the issue of relevancy was the Afghan peace negotiation, which was going on. So maybe it was not relevant at that time, but that doesn't mean that it's not part of his manifesto. And also, it's really interesting thing that the organization he's talking about that he did to make them happy, those organizations never take part in the politics of Pakistan. Even they don't even consider the state of Pakistan as a legal state. They think that's not a Sharia state, and they have the vote against Pakistan just because they believe that's not a Sharia state. So I don't know what groups of people he was trying to make happy, because those group of people don't even vote in Pakistan. They are anti-Pakistan. So that doesn't make any sense. The third thing is that he said that all those jihadi people and these kind of people, they're going to use her when she's going to be in Pakistan. Well, that's the thing I'm trying to explain, that they're going to be more underdrawn when Pakistan is going to take the responsibility of that person, and they're going to hold her for their own personal interest, which is the de-radicalization of the society. How come? I mean, I have said in my early speech that we don't want her to be set free. I just simply said, if you change the location of the person, the detention location, then that's not going to be a huge issue for us to deal with those terrorism fractions in Pakistan. And we have never said that she can, I mean, like, think about what Pakistan is doing right now. If you see the FATF conditions, what Pakistan is doing, I mean, like, there were 28 conditions which Pakistan is complying. Every other day, we are passing laws in Pakistan to control terror financing, to have money laundering control. So Pakistan is doing all the efforts to control all those fractions and all those issues. Yes, issues are there, but I don't see any danger to any American interest or the Pakistani interest if she is being repatriated to Pakistan. She's even more helpful to de-radicalize the society because, as I said, those organizations are using her plight and her detention in America as a scheme to exploit the extremism in the Muslim world, because those organizations don't believe in Pakistani state, because they said that that's not a Muslim state. So those fractions has never been a problem for us if she go back to Pakistan. This is what I believe.
Could you answer Miriam's question about the commutation or reduction of sentence, and what kind of grounds, from your legal expertise, you would, if you were advising her legal team, what would be the most powerful case for why there should be humanitarian grounds for some change in sentence, etc.?
Afia's attorney was Attorney Charles Swift, who is one of the leading attorneys in America. And I had a discussion with him about this issue in the past. And what he came up with the issue was, and the legal avenue, which is available for her is humanitarian relief on compassionate grounds due to her mental illness. So the court which has sentenced her can relieve her, can repatriate her, can commute her sentence. So that is one of the other avenues which Pakistani government can use through Vienna Convention articles. So that's one of the things. But I really feel hopeful for her mercy petition to the President of the United States. And I feel more strong that aspect right now because all this peace process going on. So I really want to connect that repatriation with the peace process, because that has been happening for the people of Pakistan, like I said. And also one more thing, which is really interesting about Lindsey Graham. I mean, Lindsey Graham, when he came to Pakistan in 2018 and he met the Prime Minister of Pakistan, he really believed that whatever is Pakistan doing in the peace process is the only solution. And remind you, he actually was against all those processes if you go back a decade. So people change with the time, their perception change, the circumstances change. So right now, it is the right circumstance to even ask for such kind of prisoners who is not even danger to American interest anymore because of those medical conditions she had. So I see this case as a prospect towards the American and Pakistan relationship.
Thank you. We have a question from Karam Shahzad. Mr. Shahzad, would you be willing to ask your question, please? And please do introduce yourself.
Sure. Can you hear me now?
We can. Thank you.
It's Khurram Shahzad, 92 News correspondent in Washington. I'm also president of Pakistani American Press Association, known as PAPA. My question to Dawood Bhai is a good friend of mine that as an American citizen, the state, United States of America, has declared Afia Siddiqui as a terrorist. As the Pakistani Americans who are settled here, whose kids are here, whose relationships are here, and when they die, they'll be buried here. What do you think of putting efforts? What are your expectations from Pakistani American diaspora? That you are here, you're advocating using Atlantic Coastal's platform, you'll be meeting some other places. What are your expectations of Pakistani diaspora? The same scenario which I gave, that Pakistani Americans will have their limitations when they will be talking about at this present time for Afia Siddiqui. And the second part of it, do you have insight of any tip from here in Washington, or somebody gave you an indication that there's a possibility because of the election that President Trump might be interested in prison swap? So either from Islamabad or from Washington, do you have any insight which brought you back here in Washington again?
Thank you, Karan. That's great questions. And actually that anticipated one of my questions. Obviously you're here in the United States right now, and to the extent that there's a presidential mercy petition that you are pinning hopes on, that would presumably require a calculus on the part of President Trump and his team that this would have some benefit with respect to the diaspora. So to paraphrase Mr. Shahzad's excellent question, what would your expectations be? What should the Pakistani diaspora be doing? How would you want to engage them in this argument?
First thing the diaspora should do is that read my book, buy my book. That's the first thing they should do. And the second thing is that, which is really interesting and that really fascinates me at the same time, was that when I read her case in the Southern District Court, the prosecution itself have expressed in the court that they are not interested whether she was part of Al-Qaeda, whether she was with Osama, whether she was with any part of organizations. The prosecution have actually, in their direct case, they said they are not even interested to connect her with any of those people or organizations. So that's why what prosecution says is what I believe is the narrative of the American government in the court. What they say publicly, that's a narrative, and that can be challenged in the court. So I see, yes, she can be a suspect according to their narrative, but when I see the court documents, I see her not a terrorist, because in the court, she's just an attempted murder accused. Attempted murder criminal. That's what I see against the American official. The second question, that how the people of Pakistan should behave in America, I think so they have to read her case again. We are people in America or in England to create our own image building. You have to create your own image. You have to clear your image. If some stigma has gone to you, and if some stigma which doesn't have a legal relevance, then you have to get off from that. Then you have to come up with the argument and hold your ground and feel more strong being as a Pakistani that such stigma should get off from me. So I think so you have to read the book, you need to understand the case, and then let the American understand the matter. How many times, like in the Directorate book by Stephen Cole, it has been said it was so messy at the time, the kind of information was coming in during the time of Afghanistan, that 85% people who were interrogating for CIA were private contractors. What information was coming, what was not coming. There were like 700 people in Guantanamo Bay, and within 2 years, there were only 200 left. Now there are only 43 people. So you have to see sometime, maybe the information which has been gone through, maybe that's not strong enough. So it just only depends what comes through. So I'm just only relying on the court documents. That's my source. And this question, like who is trying to influence me in American government or in Pakistan, that this is the season to ask for her repatriation. No, I'm not being backed by anybody. From the last 9 years, I'm working in Pakistan as a very independent person. So nobody can influence my ideas. I believe what I believe. That's why this is my second book. My first book was Overseas Pakistani Right to Vote. This is what I believe. So I have no influence from anybody. I see what is happening in the geopolitics, and I see the opportunity to explain what I believe. This is the independent voice.
I don't mean to speak for Mr. Shahzad, but I think you may have misinterpreted that question. I think his question was whether or not there's any indication based on your research that this is an idea that's being considered, not that anyone was trying to influence you or push you to ask that. We have two more questions. I'm going to ask them to both ask their questions briefly, and then we can begin to wrap up because I want to be against time. Mr. Yusuf Chowdhury first, and then Azim Khan. So first, Mr. Chowdhury.
Okay, can you hear me?
We can. Please introduce yourself once your video's on.
Okay, okay.
Thank you, sir.
Good afternoon, everybody. Thank you, Mr. Irfan, and thank you, Dawood, for doing this session. Very informative. We can learn several things on this issue. My question to Dawood is our CJ, Aisha Faruqi, who was in Houston, and she was frequent visitor to Afia Siddiqui. She has compiled a report about her imprisonment and everything. Do you know anything about the report? I mean, what was in the report, and when she presented the report to the government of Pakistan, what was their take on it? If you have any knowledge of their report or what was in the report, can you shed some light on that, please?
Thank you, Mr. Chowdhury. Before you answer that, let me just get Azim Khan to ask his question. Azim is currently an intern with the South Asian Center. Please, Azim.
Hi, Dawood. So my question to you is, if I remember correctly, when this issue was at its forefront during the late 2000s, at the end of the Musharraf era, one of the reasons it gained so much traction was the news that her three infant children from the age of, I think, less than 1 to 5 or 6, they were being held with her in the Bagram air base. And I think that narrative seems to have died down. My question to you is, was that correct? Were her children being kept and tortured in the Bagram air base? And if so, was that, if it isn't, is that one of the reasons why the support for her being released has died down compared to like about 5-10 years ago?
Thank you. Dawood, if you could answer both those questions as succinctly as possible, that'd be great.
Yeah, the first question about the Aisha Faruqi, I mean, the Council General question, I mean, like whenever the Council General visit, they make their reports periodically. There was only one report which became public at the time when I was contesting this case in the Supreme Court, and the media actually published that report. In that report, it was written that she seems not mentally well. This is what she observed. And at the end, she gave certain recommendations that the Pakistani government must repatriate and find avenues to repatriate her. So this was just like a normal, commonly reports, which actually happened with the time. And the second question about her 3 children, I mean, like I said in the starting point, that her disappearance is very mysterious. We don't know the real facts, what has happened. She was along with her 3 children. I mean, the little one was Suleiman, there was one Ahmed, and there was Mariam. Suleiman has never been found. He was 6 months old. He's still missing from 2003. With Ahmed, Ahmed is with his grandmother now, and Mariam, she is with her grandmother now as well. Ahmed was being found with her in Ghazni compound outside in 2008, and then he was sent back to Pakistan because he was a juvenile, and the government of Pakistan, actually Hamid Karzai government at the time, helped to, repatriate him back to Pakistan. Her daughter was found outside the house of their mother's house in 2010 after the trial decision. So yes, 2 children are still with the family, but one of them is still missing. That's what I know.
Thank you. Dawood, firstly, thank you for taking all those questions, and thank you to all the questioners for asking such powerful, straightforward questions. Our goal in these discussions is to have a free and frank conversation based on mutual respect, and I think everyone today really lived up to the highest principles on that regard. For us, this is an interesting and important conversation as we think about how to support stronger US engagement in South Asia. Dawood's point about the United States in often taking for granted the support of populations in the countries that it seeks to partner with is an important one for American audiences and American policymakers to pay attention to. With great power and responsibility requires often the practice of that with great humility. And one can argue that for all of America's virtues, humility often is not one of them. And so maybe this would be a corrective to say, in order to get from its allies all that it hopes for, it needs to take those allies as serious partners in their own right. I should say in closing, for those of you who have not engaged with the Atlantic Council South Asia Center before, we hope you'll come back. There's a lot of great work being done. At least one of our non-resident senior fellows on this call, Dr. Yelena Bieberman, has an incredible survey of Kashmiri youth, including writing on that in ways that are quite relevant to some of the parts of this conversation. I won't try and identify the other NRSFs. I know there's at least a couple others on this call who have joined us as well. And the blog posts, including the one I mentioned by Dawood for the Council, are archived on our page, which you can find through the atlanticcouncil.org via the South Asia Center. Again, we look forward to having you back. Please reach out and let us know how we can engage you in the work we are doing. And Dawood, thank you so much for being here this afternoon, for taking the time to lay out this, answering all these questions so carefully and so thoughtfully. We're very, very grateful. So have a great afternoon and a great evening wherever you are. Thank you. Bye-bye.